Long before the Steam Deck took the world by storm, I hoped someone would come into the Windows handheld market and create an affordable handheld with enough power to play my growing Steam backlog. This almost came true 2 years ago, but the small team behind it lost interest and moved on. So you can imagine my excitement when Anbernic wanted to have a meeting to discuss their plans to create a low-cost Windows handheld in January of 2021. I gave suggestions on suitable processors that I had privately tested, and they ended up picking one of them for this finished product. Hello everyone, my name is Taki, and today we're going to do an in-depth review on the Win600. I know that it has become fashionable to hate this product due to the asking price of $400, but I am going to give it an honest shot. I recorded these remarks before I had the chance to do the review that you are about to watch, so I will just say that I am hopeful, yet apprehensive. I bought the two models that you see featured in this video with my own money, and all of the opinions that you are about to hear are my own. Let's move over to the specs of the Win600. This device comes in two configurations, but I would say this configuration is the only one worth considering if you are in the market. We have a fairly low-end and low-power CPU from AMD paired with a single 8GB stick of DDR4 RAM and 256GB of M.2 SATA storage. Our battery is a 39 watt-hour cell, and we have a 6-inch 720p IPS panel. For connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth 4.2 with a collection of systems available to us. This review will be focusing on Windows. So let's quickly go over the controls on this device. We have a fairly typical layout with the select and start on the top, followed by a set of ABXY buttons with colored screen printing in the recess. We also have a tiny blue accent on the D-pad with blue coloring on the home button and the Windows key. The functionality of these buttons will change depending on your OS. On the bottom half, we have a set of recessed switch analog sticks with L3 and R3 functionality. The top is a pleasant surprise with a set of stacked shoulder buttons. You'll notice that we have a big air exhaust on the side, and we'll talk more about it and the fan later in this video. Dead center, we have a reset button, followed by a full-size USB port, and a single Type-C port for charging and data transfer. The right side of the device draws inspiration from a bigger Windows handheld company with a toggle switch for gamepad and mouse mode. We also have a dedicated button for quick access to the on-screen keyboard in Windows. The left side houses our power button and a set of volume keys. And finally, at the bottom of the device, we have a set of bottom-firing stereo speakers, a headphone jack, and what I'm assuming is a microphone. Let's take a moment to specifically talk about the D-pad. With Anbernic products, you can usually assume that you're going to be getting some parts that are reused in different devices, and the D-pad is almost always reused. This is a good thing. I thought this would be the case with this device, but this button feels different from the device that I think originally used it. I don't know how easy this is going to come across on video because it's more of a feeling thing, but this feels like it's almost clicking into place as I pivot around in a circle. I don't have this problem on the RG353, where the movement more or less glides freely, and I also don't have it on the RG552. I suspect there might be some burrs on my component, or there is some issue with the membrane. On the opposite side, the ABXY buttons are essentially perfect. When it comes to the shoulder buttons, I have mixed feelings. When you go to use the R1 button, you have good actuation across the entire range, and the button feels great to use. I actually think this is a huge improvement over the button that is used in Odin, but the R2 button is significantly worse for reasons that you wouldn't expect. I don't mind so much that it is a digital button, and I even think it's more comfortable to use than the one in the 353, but it has its own downside. The problem is that the button goes inside the case when you press down. The point where it goes under the shell is exactly where your finger will usually rest. Here's a profile shot so you can see what I'm talking about. If I press R1, you can see the button sticks up above the shell in order to create a smooth transition to the edge. If you look at R2, it is inside the shell, and your finger will catch on this edge all the time. Because of the way that you're going to be holding this thing when you're playing, you are going to be in a situation where your finger is constantly scraping against this rough edge, and it just feels bad. Now let's talk about the analog sticks. To do that, I also have to talk a little about the ergonomics of this device. I have to just state right here that I do not like this analog placement on a Windows gaming handheld. I don't have a problem with a PlayStation layout, but we would need the analogs to be closer to the center for that to work well, and these are not. When you couple that with the fact that the edge juts out, it doesn't make for a pleasant gaming experience. If I'm going to be playing a shooter game that needs the use of both analog sticks at the same time, this is without a doubt a bad layout. That's partially because this device was designed in a way where you will naturally want to hold the device like this. In this way, the device is pretty comfortable. You have this edge here that I don't care for, but it fits into the palm of your hand and you are fine. The problem is that you cannot use this comfortable position when you need to use the sticks. If the left stick was on the top, you could make this situation better by only needing to inconvenience yourself to get to the right one to change your view and to aim. You would also be able to get to all of your shoulder buttons with ease. This is how the device wants to be held. To play this game, you're going to have to scoot the device up like this, and this is a huge device. It's not a small one. Now I can get to both sticks, but getting to the triggers is a pain because of how far away they are. If I wanted to shoot my gun, now I have to aim down the sights with my left shoulder button held in place while moving at the same time. When I want to shoot, I need to do the same thing on the other side of the device. Trying to do anything quick with this layout is a huge chore. You could probably get used to this, but I am not, and I don't like it. Continuing on with the ergonomics, let's talk about this grip. I would say this is the first Anbernic device that has a real grip, but I don't think they went far enough. This helps in holding such a big handheld, but it almost feels like a drop in the bucket. If you compare the regions of this that matter the most, namely the peak and valley, the Win600 offers less of a grip compared to something like the Odin. Odin's grip seems like a chungus compared to the Win600's nub. You are left with a small grip on a handheld that is now begging for a 3D printed solution. It just seems like a missed opportunity. Let's move over to the build quality of the Win600, and I have to mention that this is my least favorite paint job of any device. Anbernic started this trend back with the RG552. I like to refer to this as the GBD paint because it's the same style that they use in all of their devices to a fault, but what I will say is that it feels better on GBD products like the Win2. Here's a close-up of the case. Now I have to tell you right off the bat that this is a fairly smooth finish and it doesn't feel that good. When you see it, you would probably assume that it is premium, but it is not. This feels very cheap, and it is a huge step back coming off the release of the RG353P. I also went ahead and bought the white color option for this device, and I thought that was going to be pure white, and I thought that would be the one that I would use the most because of how much I don't like the other color option. But I was wrong on both points. I don't know if this will look cheap to you as you watch this video, but this is an extremely cheap finish that they've got going on here. It's this creamy pearl finish that just simply looks and feels bad. If you compare it to something that is pure white like the Odin Light, that one feels much better both in color and in the paint finish. So, knowing what I know now, if I was to buy one of the two options that are available, I would not buy this one, which says a lot. I want to point out something wonky that I'm seeing with the build quality of my unit. We have 4 screws holding this back shell together with 2 screws on either end. In the middle, there's some play here. You can see there's nothing keeping this thing clamped down in this area, and it's a little strange. I checked with my white unit to see if it also had the same thing, and it does. To Anbernic's credit though, they did not use the 3-part design on this device, so it's a bit stronger than something like the RG552. You have some play near the area that I just pointed out, but it's not that bad on the whole. I debated on including this summary because I don't want to seem like I'm railing on this device, but it feels cheap in the hand due to some design decisions that were made. There's no metal frame under the screen, so this device is almost entirely plastic, which is not common with Windows handhelds. If we are comparing this to the Win2 again, this feels like a really solid clamshell. This device sold for around $700, and it feels like it should cost that much by the standards of the day. I just don't know if this device feels like it should be $400. And I don't even know what metric I should use for this because other Windows handhelds are more expensive than this by a lot. But I don't think that the Win600 holds a candle to something like the Switch Lite if we were to open this up to mainstream handhelds. If you're coming to the Win600 from other devices that I've reviewed on this channel already, you are going to notice that the default color temperature is really rough on the eyes. It's got 2 big things working against it. The first is that the screen is really warm, and the second is that it has a strong orange tint towards one end. Up against the stock experience on the RG353, the Win600 screen is much worse. This would almost be enough of a reason that I would never want to use this device, but we can thankfully customize this panel inside the AMD driver settings. Go in there and set the color temperature to around 7800 and you will get a big improvement. The second point is something that we can unfortunately not fix, and that is the discoloration from the backlight from the left to the right side. This is something that is extremely obvious when you have the device in your hand and you're playing a game where the screen has an even color on both sides, but it is not easy to pick up while filming. I have some panel measurements to share with you, but I first want to explain the entire left side of the screen is going to be a bit cooler than the right side. The backlight is on the left side, and I don't know if that's the reason why this is happening, but it is there, and there is a big difference from the left to the right, as you can see by the measurements that I took. I will also point out that both of my devices have this issue. I will say that this is not very common in this market, and I only ever saw something like this in a prototype that never came to market. Let's take a break from going over the screen to talk about the speakers. I think based on the size of the device, I was expecting the sound to be a bit higher than it is, but I was surprised to see that the volume of the 353 and the 600 are fairly close together. I would have liked to see a beefier set of speakers on this device since we have the space for them. There are a lot of my subscribers that are really sensitive to Windows handhelds with loud fans, so I want to do a small section on fan noise and TDP. Before I explain what's going on in the clips on screen, I can just say that this fan can handle the heat that this processor will generate when you try to push it. I never felt like I was at risk of something going wrong, and you have all of the tools available to you to get the most out of this package. You can do that on a case-by-case basis by changing the TDP. Now we have an underpowered processor in the Win600, and it comes with its own unique handicaps placed on it by the manufacturer, so we are going to need to be creative and roll up our sleeves to tweak settings if flat out raising the TDP is not enough to make a game playable. Generally speaking, you'll be looking at a mix of over 20 watts to push demanding games to be playable on this system. Battery life is going to take a hit, but at least the games will run. With that in mind, I want to show the impact that TDP adjustments alone have on FPS. I have a decibel meter pointed at the fan for these clips, and the device is laying down flat on a table, so you can get a worst case understanding of the fan volume levels. Starting out at 10 watt, we get 24 FPS in this game. If we bump that to 14 watt, we get 34 FPS in this scene, but your average FPS will be much lower. If we go up from here, you start to see diminishing returns on this system with only a small improvement at 18 watt. If we push the system full tilt at 23 watt, we get 40 FPS in this scene. I want to point out that this is not the performance that you will see out of the box. I've gone in and changed the RAM speed to 1600 MHz. We can easily reboot the device back into the BIOS and change this setting back to the default setting so you can see what it would be like at max TDP. In this case, we bump it down to 36 FPS. Now I mentioned that the company handicapped this device, and I know some of you watching this know exactly what I mean when I say that. This device uses an integrated GPU, and it only has a single DDR4 stick. That means we do not get any of the benefits that come to Ryzen systems with dual-channel RAM. These benefits are fairly well known, which is why this device is getting so much hate online, but I've seen a lot of misinformation about just how much performance was lost by not going with a dual-slot configuration. The listed TDPs in these clips are not accurate, but they are the same between each pair. First up, Resident Evil 3 with a single stick of DDR4 1600 MHz. And now with two sticks. Next up, we have Witcher 3. This game doesn't run well with either configuration, but the boost is still there. This is our final video comparison with Skyrim. This one gets a decent boost. This last one is just a picture, but we have Rise of the Tomb Raider going from 22.25 FPS minimum settings to 32.56. So, as you can see from these four examples, dual channel RAM is a meaningful way to significantly boost performance on this low-end chip. It makes a lot of titles playable that aren't with the current Win600, and it improves emulation performance. I can't for the life of me fathom why they made this dumb choice, but if I had to guess, I would say that the original mini PC that they used to test this chip back in 2021 only had a single slot, so they thought that that was good enough. If that is not the case, someone messed up big time. Speaking of RAM, let's do a quick teardown. We can see everything here is all black, and I think this would have looked awesome if they would have decided to go with a transparent shell like the original Aya Neo. I've seen a few RAM versions talked about for this device, but the retail models like the one I have here come with a good old stick of glowy RAM. We also have a glowy SSD that we'll look at once this is back together. While we are here, I want to talk about the cooling fan for a moment. This one isn't as big as something that you'd see in an Aya device, but it does do a good job up to 23 watts from what I've seen. It's just dwarfed by some of the bigger fans in this segment. This small one doesn't do a bad job, but it would have been cooler to get a solution that could do something for our RAM at the same time, because that and the SSD can get a bit toasty. The final thing that I want to talk about is the core of this shell and the lack of a metal frame. We can see the back of this screen through this tiny hole here, and the entire frame and the plastic that rests on it is just a sheet of plastic. This part really should have been a metal frame, and I can't see why they didn't. This plastic isn't doing this device any favors, and it actually causes some problems with the screen that you'll see in just a moment. I don't think it was worth cheaping out on this aspect because it would not have been that much money to make a proper metal frame for this. This old device actually has a metal core that you can see poking out from the corner, and it goes all the way to the other side around the battery. If this device did not have that, it would also feel much cheaper and lose a lot of its strength. This plastic part can cause a lot of issues, from light bleeding to uneven pressure on the glass when you touch the screen, so it is generally not something to strive for in a high-end handheld. I mentioned this earlier, but it's easier to see now with the shell off that we could really use a proper sound chamber or a bigger component in a device like this. The Win600 uses this Lego brick speaker that they've been using for years, and it just leaves me wanting for something better because this could have been a decent media consumption device if you wanted it to be. And just because I haven't seen one yet, here's a close-up of that good old glowy RAM. Before I put the back shell together, I want to quickly mention something that you should be aware of with this model. Typically, when you inject a model with plastic that you intend to later paint, you will inject a plastic formula that gives you a color that is close to your end goal. You can see the inside of this device is more or less black. This is pretty close to the color of the RG552, but it's really far from the surface color of this device. The reason why this is significant is that the injected color is the color that you will see if you were to scratch up this back panel. Because our injected plastic is darker than the painted shell, it will be really obvious to you if you were to damage this back part. This is the main reason why you do not inject plastic with a color that is drastically different from your end goal. I would categorize this next point as an annoyance, but it is worth mentioning. The front glass on this screen has imperfections from the OCA factory that Anbernic used, and those imperfections show up anytime this screen is not perfectly wiped down. This is hard to capture on camera, but it is so obvious in person when the screen has fingerprints on it. The imperfections look like horizontal scratches across the entire surface of the device, but my scratches are the most pronounced from the top of the analog sticks to the top of the glass. Again, this is easy to see in person, but not easy to film. However, I did find one way that makes it easy for you to see what it looks like to me when I am using this device. If you blow on the screen, the fog will fill into all of the micro abrasions on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. You can try this on another device that you own, and you shouldn't have this problem. There is only one other device that I've ever seen with this problem, and it was the first batch of RP2 Plus devices. That device has one part across the lower half, and if you own it, you know what I mean. It is very easy to see when you're using the device with your fingers, and you are in a room with a light or you are outside. Finally, let's boot up the device and look at some gaming performance. Here we are in the Windows 10 system. In this system, you can flip the right side toggle to switch into mouse mode. This will allow you to use the right analog for mouse controls with R1 and L1 acting as right click and left click. My only gripe with this is that I wish both of these sticks had the ability to be used as a mouse, so you could do one-handed operation, even though this is a bigger device. What we're going to do now is look at PC gaming performance of this processor before looking at emulation. As promised though, here's a benchmark of that glowy SSD for those that care. Something that you should be aware of before picking up one of these to go through your old backlog is that this device is missing a lot of retro resolutions that are needed for those games. As you can see in this menu, we only have 720p available, and this can cause some issues that you will have to work around when they come up. In my case, I just wanted to play Just Cause, but the game throws an error due to the fact that the system doesn't support the resolution the game wants to use on boot. I have to check how Steam handles these situations when I get more time. This next part of the video is where things started to go wrong while I was working on this video. In the clip that is playing right now, I was trying to click on the Explorer icon to talk more about Just Cause not running, but I could not get it to work. You can then see me testing other spots on the screen while my finger input is spread across the entire panel. I tried toggling the side switch, which didn't help, and I tried to sleep the device and wake it back up. That also didn't help. I'll let the camera's audio play out so you can hear my thoughts as this was happening. Just be aware that I was sick while recording this. So that was really strange. I unplugged this and then I plugged in my keyboard and I tried it again and it was still broken. Then I unplugged the charging cable and everything started working again. So let's do this now live. You really couldn't even, come on, Anbernic. I'm really trying here. I'm really trying. Okay, so let's plug that in. What the Oh my god. I found that opening up the Paint app was the best way for you to see what is happening in these situations. This is also the time where I started to acquire another Win600 to verify if this was a one-off issue. After a reboot, I thought this issue went away, but it just takes a few moments to kick back in when you are charging the device. Right after getting my second unit, I was shocked and disappointed to find that it also had this problem. And just for reference, this is the same cable and charger that I use in my studio for all of my product reviews. I tried 3 chargers with this, and 2 of them have this issue only with the Win600. As you can see in this clip, the same cable and charger do not cause any issues on the original Aya Neo, so this is not an issue with my equipment. I tried to see if this was a current issue, but my meter shows no big difference between the chargers that have this problem on the Win600 and the one that does not, so I don't know what's going on. The problem is that in trying to collect video of this problem happening, I found and recorded even worse issues that I have with my original device. This is what it looks like when I wake up my device from sleep. Everything you see in this video right now, I can see with my naked eye. I recorded one clip of this on accident, and then I recorded another to verify that I could recreate this issue. I have this problem that you see here every time I wake up my dark gray model from an extended sleep, and I don't know why. This clip has 2 things going on, and I want to explain both of them so you understand what is happening. In this video, I am trying to show off an issue that happens right above the letter C in the logo when you press on the screen for normal touch operation. You will see some visual distortion in the same area each time you press the screen, and this happens on both of my devices. While I was trying to record this on my white version to get double verification, I encountered another strange issue where the backlight started to cut off. I was originally watching what you are seeing now while it was filming, and I thought that I had blinked, but now that I'm looking back at the video, I can clearly see the entire screen shuts off for a split second as a result of me touching the screen. I have no idea why this is happening, and I've never seen something like this on another device. Now that all that wonky stuff is out of the way, let's dive into some PC performance tests. As I mentioned earlier, we only have single channel RAM, so we are going to be a bit limited in what we can do with this device. There are countless things that you could do on a game-by-game basis to improve performance in games beyond just increasing TDP, but that is going to ultimately mean that your device won't necessarily be plug and play. You are going to need to do a lot of tweaking to get good performance in games, and I'm showing off an example of what that might look like in this section. Now, some people really do not like tweaking stuff and they swear against it, but this is my bread and butter. I personally like to get the most out of weak hardware, so this is fun for me, but it might not be for you. I use as much power as the system needed to run the game well. I did not pay too much attention to battery life because this device doesn't have good battery life in any situation, to be honest. Because of that, I'd rather have good performance for an hour or so than mediocre performance for 2 or 3.
Mara's great. She helped get me set up back in the day.
Now let's look at emulation performance on the Win600, and we're going to push this all the way up to Switch emulation. I'm going to cut out low-tier systems for this because there are far better devices out there with significantly better battery life if that is what you're interested in. When it comes to Dreamcast, we are getting great performance at 720p with widescreen hacks. For PSP, we have no issues upscaling games to 3x native resolution. 3DS performance is going to be hit or miss under Windows depending on the game that you are playing, but this is much better than it was in the past. For 3DS, I would still rather buy and use official hardware. Let's move over to GameCube with the Dolphin emulator. I was really impressed with the performance that we were able to get out of this device, and there was only one game that I tested that ran slow. I also got great performance with Wii and a collection of demanding titles.
Definitely do this! Backslash!
When it comes to PS2, we are not going to be able to run very demanding games on this device, and the performance is generally worse than what you'd find on Android handhelds that are available right now. If you are willing to do some extreme hacks, you can probably get by in heavier games. As you can imagine, PS3 is a bit too much for the Win600. I was originally impressed with how smooth this game was, but it hit a wall very quickly.
Are you hollow?
Let's move over to Wii U performance with the CMU emulator. And finally, Switch emulation. This was the most impressive thing that I found on this device, and it was completely unexpected. Not all Switch games will run well, but you should be able to find a few 3D ones that don't run that bad. Let's wrap up things with my pros and cons of the Win600. For pros, we don't have too many, and I'm trying to be fair here. I think that the emulation performance could be considered as a pro because we are able to get good performance in Windows without too much fuss. I think the fan on this is decent, and it is much better than I expected. I liked the full-size USB port on the top, which was very helpful during the testing of this device. I also like the R1 and L1 buttons. And finally, it is cool to have software support for Windows and SteamOS on day one. Now let's go over the cons. In first place is easily the lack of dual-channel RAM. It would have made this device significantly better than it is now, and it is a huge missed opportunity from a gaming company that should have known better. Down from here, I would have to group all of the crazy stuff surrounding this screen. This includes the uneven color balance on both sides of the screen, the ghost touch input, the visual distortion that looks like my screen will blow up on wake up, and the visible screen flickering that happens on my white unit when I touch the screen. Another big con for me is the control layout. I was mainly interested in a device like this to be able to play older 3D PC titles, and I cannot see myself doing so with this layout. It is cumbersome to use, and the analog sticks are far too sensitive for most of the games that I want to play. The build quality is another weak point on this device, and it is not up to scratch with my expectations after coming off my RG353 review. There are a lot of areas where they cheaped out instead of going for things that would have made the device better, and the paint and finish that they went with are very low end. And finally, the price. This thing is not worth the asking price at all. There is no way to sugarcoat that or spin it at all. This thing is hardly worth $250, let alone the promotional pricing of $375 that has now dried up. When I had that meeting that I originally talked about at the beginning of this video in 2021, Anbernic stated that they were targeting a very cheap price target near or around $200. This is why I was excited, and if this thing was $200, I probably would have been willing to put up with most of the dumb issues this device has, but not for $400. That is crazy. After the Steam Deck was announced, I even remember bringing up how that would influence the price strategy of this device, and I was told that it was still going to be cheaper than that, but here we are in July of 2022, and it is the same price as the 64GB Steam Deck model. Somewhere along the way, something changed. The prices of the components that are in this product changed since they were originally going to be used by another company in 2020, but they went down, not up. This processor is now sub $30, and most of what is in here you can price out for yourself. I am worried that a company that I at one time heralded as having the best and most affordable gaming handheld under $100 has completely lost it. And if they want to enter into the premium segment, they have a long way to go, because this ain't it. I want to wrap up this video by giving you my recommendations. I think if you're not immediately against a product like this, you will fall into one of three scenarios. So for scenario 1, you want a PC gaming handheld and you aren't in a rush. You have a ton of Steam games that you want to work through, and you've been waiting for an affordable PC handheld for a long time. This is the group that I fall into. You could order the Steam Deck. It's the same price as the Win600, but it is astronomically more capable. If the Steam Deck isn't available where you live, it's not available where I live, you could get the same processor that is in the Win600 for $200 less by pre-ordering the Loki Zero. That device has better performance compared to the Win600 because it supports dual-channel RAM. If that's not enough performance for your needs, you could get the Loki Mini Pro, which has about 4 times the performance of the Win600. Alright, so here's scenario 2. You were just diagnosed with a severe case of FOMOitis and it's spreading. The Steam Deck is not available where you live, and you don't feel like waiting until October or November to get something better. In this case, you could hop on over to the AYANEO Air IgG campaign and back the cheapest model that they have for $500. That would get you a Ryzen 5560U, which would absolutely decimate the Win600 dollar for dollar. The company claims that they can ship this in around a month or so, and there's a good chance that you'll be in the first wave of shipments with the current backer amount. And finally, scenario 3. You are a person who bought into this device after hearing the "it's shipping now" meme too many times. You get the device, and no matter how hard you try, the custom firmware that you want to use just won't let you download dual-channel RAM. You have a big backlog of Steam games that you thought you'd plow through with this device, but the performance isn't there, and the ergonomics keep you from wanting to use it long enough to even make a dent. You decide to make do with just using the device for emulation instead, but you end up getting worse performance than you see online from people that are using Android handhelds that cost half the price of the thing that you bought. Your device ultimately sits on a shelf eating dust, and by the time you realize that you want to sell it, all of those devices that seemed so far away when you placed your order are now shipping out and are readily available at the same cost that you paid or significantly cheaper. You realize that there is almost no resale value in the thing that you bought, and you're forced to sell it for well under $200 to try and cut your losses. At the end of the day, you end up losing more money to rent something that you could hardly use when you could have just waited for something better. Sometimes the thing that you're waiting for is actually better than the thing that you can get now. Those are the 3 situations that I think most people would fit in, and unless you just like to collect these things as a hobby as I do, there is no way I can recommend people to buy the Win600 at its current price. And just so it's here and not hidden anywhere else, $250 to $275 is the most that I would pay for this device. Anyway, if you want to take a look at a better Anbernic product that is also new, take a look at my review of the RG353. That thing is much better than this, and it's shipping now. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.